you use SQL Azure now? Hands up, hands up. 5. Okay. Okay, and why not others use SQL Azure? Have you ever tried to use? Nothing? Okay, it's interesting for you or not?
Yes. They're here.
Okay. I want to talk about the differences about the SQL Azure and SQL on-premise, especially SQL Server 2012, for the reason that you should be prepared before you start to use SQL Azure with the part of production environment. Why is the part of production environment? Because from my perspective, SQL Azure is something like a special appendix, special new feature for your SQL Server productivity systems, and it's not replacement. We talk about some incompatibilities and compatibilities soon, and you will know why it's not replacement from my perspective. Okay, the first point, we want to work with SQL Azure. Oops.
It's not SQL Azure anymore, it's Windows Azure SQL Database. We actually thought that was a joke when they said they were going to rename it like that. But that's what it's called now, Windows Azure SQL Database. So, what does you call that? You call it SQL Azure.
If you're writing any blogs about the SQL Azure tools or something like this, you should change SQL Azure, copy and replace, yes, by SQL Database. Okay, its size does matter. How much you need, how much place you need for your environment for SQL Server? Why, if you have, for example, the production databases, how big they are? 2 TB? 100 gigs? More? 2 terabytes? More? Something like this? Okay, with SQL Azure, okay, SQL database. You can use personal, of course, with 1 gigabits and 5 gigabits, and business. It's some of the 50 gigabits, it's maximum now. It's enough? What you think? Not. It's not enough. Okay. Because it's not enough. And if you want to only test something like a small development project, some like just only testing the SQL Azure, you can use something like a private SQL database. Because if you use less than 100 megabytes, you will pay only $5 per month. It's new from last two weeks, new functionality. Yeah, something like this. 2-3 weeks ago, the functionality has come to SQL database. Is version does matter? Which version of SQL Server you use in your environment? 8, R2, 5, maybe, 2012? First version of SQL Azure was 10.25. It was something between 2008 and 2008 R2. Now, from last December?
Yeah.
Yeah, from last December.
That's when I think broke.
Yeah. SQL Azure changed for 11. 11 is compatible with which version now? The new SQL Server 2012. It's important because if you want to work with this, you must use, for example, Management Studio with SQL Server 2012 for all functionality. Is collection does matter. Which collection did you use for your databases? Latin general? Default top, yeah? Okay. But because I'm from Poland, sometimes in Poland we use different collection, like for example, Polish. Yes? It's almost natural for my customer in Poland. But in SQL Azure, you can't use other than SQL Latin 1 general. you must use only English collation. If you have, for example, customers with other languages, like example, I don't know, Spanish, German, something like this, and you have data, sorry, you must use English collation.
Can I just ask you, because I can't remember, I never can remember, whether if that is the SQL collation or is that the Windows collation?
It's SQL collation.
So it's SQL collation.
Yeah. If you want to use another collation for SQL Azure, you can use, but only for the level of table level collation, just for the temporary table, not for all SQL Azure database. If you use more than 150 gigs for data, for example, like an insert data for SQL Azure, you will receive error message that your data reaches your quota, and the solution for this is partitioning. Are you partitioning your databases? No one? So? Yeah? Okay. If you start to think about SQL Azure, you must start to think about partitioning for the future. It doesn't matter, partitioning per rows or per tables, it doesn't matter, but you must start to think about partitioning. Oh, SQL database.
One other thing to mention is, if you create a SQL Azure database and it's 100 gigs, but you've only got 1 gig of data in there, you only pay for the 1 gig data, even though you provisioned 100 gig space. So if you know that your database is going to increase in size, rather than set the limit low, set the limit high, because they'll only charge you for the space you're actually using in that database. Just a little gotcha.
Which logins you use for your environment? Mixed? Yes?
Yeah.
SA? Something like default? By default something?
Say no password.
You must remember, for SQL database now, you can't use restricted logins. Admin, administrator, guest, root, or SA. You can't use, you must create another login and name it, of course. Data migration. It will be something for Richard soon, yeah? You can use SQL Server 2008 integration services, not 2012 yet. It will be soon, probably in next 2-3 months. Yeah. The bulk copy, of course. System data SQL client class. Scripts, of course, with using insert, and of course SQL data compare from Redgate. Which components? Analysis services, it's not exist now. Reporting services is, but not in the full functional with the same version of the premise. It's a part of reporting services only.
And it's only recently came out, like last couple of months. So that's very new. So it's been one of the big bugbears was there wasn't reporting services. Now there is, but you know, it's a thing to play with and see if it will actually serve for you or not.
You can't use restore if you want. Have you ever used restore statement in databases? Yeah. Someone?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not going to worry.
No in the clouds? Okay. You can attach a database to SQL database server, generally, by default. No SQL Server agent. Are you use agents? Okay, no SQL Server agent. No SQL Server jobs. Are you use jobs? Handmade, sorry. No SQL Server browser tool.
Could you weirdly use like an agent on a different machine with a target server on Azure?
Yeah. Yes, you can. So if you've got a SQL Server in-house, you can hook it up to a SQL Azure server. Who's got a SQL Server in-house?
No, I see.
No one.
No hands.
database queries and indexes. Are you use indexes? Yeah, it's the simple question. Which kind of indexes you use? You must use clustered index with your Azure SQL database. Only clustered index. And you must create clustered index before insert statement will be updated. You must remember about this. Heap tables are not supported. That you can use a temporary table again without the clustered index, but you can't push the data into SQL database without the clustered index. Just a simple code for create index. If you try to push data to your SQL database without clustered index tables, you will receive error message with the words from Microsoft, create clustered index and try again. That's it.
What about select into?
Okay?
You do that? No, that won't work. No. The annoying thing is you can create a table. Fine, good. Create all the tables you like. It'll only fail at insert time, which is really annoying.
Can you do those as two separate statements? Can you create a table and then alter table at constraint?
Yes.
You can.
Yeah, you can modify it, you can do that, but you can't actually
Add data.
Yeah, you can't add data, which of course is really annoying.
Sort of kind of relate that. Can you do like set identity insert on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get your stuff across. And when you say clustered index, does it mean that I get that you have to have does it that you can then have secondary indexes as well? If it's just that you've got to have
You must have a custom index because you're a multi-tenant system. Heap tables can be very slow, and they're just not going to support that ever.
You should remember about the schema. If you create a schema for your database, you must remember for the SQL database that you can use only free name schema. If you use, for example, for name schema, like sometimes some of my customers use for name schema the longer. You must remember that only free names schema you can use for SQL database. And yeah, we talked a moment ago about multi-tenancy. Close connection to the service by the service, not by you. It's the moment when you create something like a long query, and the long query is executing, and the connection is stopped by the service because of multi-tenancy. Why? Excessive resource usage, for example. Connection have been either for 30 minutes, for example, or longer. And failover, because server failures. You must remember that you can't use the long queries for the SQL database because for the multi-tenancy and the internal migration data between the internal databases in SQL database, in SQL Azure, the transaction must be commitment for the other databases. Because as a standard, in fact, you will connect for the one database, but in the background, the service uses three databases. One is for you use, and the second tool is the backup for the databases. And all commitment transactions will be commitment when the data will be delivered for all three instances in the background. Two in the background and one with your connection. And of course, you can receive errors. The number of errors are here. And at the last slide will be links for all errors for SQL Server 2012.
Basically, if developers, you have to program assuming the connection is going to fail. You have to put things in retry links. You will almost always guarantee some point will be failure, and so you can't just use a SQL connection anymore when you're developing a robust app. It takes a bit of getting used to, and it is annoying.
This table is a simple example about the point of differences with SQL Server Premise and Windows Azure SQL Database. For example, with the user, for example, server level security role. On-premise, it's the security admin, and login manager on SQL Azure Database. It could help for you, this table, when you create and organize your environment in SQL database. Federations. Is anyone of you use federations? Okay, not in the SQL, in the Windows? Federation services, something like this? No. Federations is something which help you for push data for more than one databases, and especially it's helpful for you for the keeping the data with on different databases, and especially for the performance. I think the performance and the connection.
Yeah. So the database. So does anybody know if I say database federations in SQL Azure? Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
No.
Right. So basically, what it is it because you're limited in size on SQL Azure, what they've done is they've done a little dodge called federations, which is basically a way of you have a master database and then you have sub-databases for different customers. And when you go into a database, you can use, for example, customer ID 3, and basically it'll add a where clause unbeknownst to you to all of your queries. But all of that data is stored within one database, and they can be separate databases, and you can join and separate databases apart, all based on a customer ID. It's something well worth having a good look at. We don't have a big set of slides on it because it's a topic that could have a talk on its own. But if the size issue is interesting, is a limiting factor to you, and you're a multi-customer system, you can use federations to get around the size of the problem.
Federation for SQL database appears first time at the end of 2011 with update of SQL Azure, for SQL Azure Data Services. And you can scale up and scale out. For example, if you have, for example, a database with 10,000 records, for example, in one database, and you insert data and insert. For example, in your SQL Server on-premise in a standard data center, you can growing up your database, for example, for 10 million records, okay? It's nothing special, but sometimes you need place, storage for this database, and of course something like a CPU, something like this, especially storage. With federation, as Richard said, you can push the data the same. For example, 10,000 records, for maximum 10,000 records per database, and with the inserting data, you create, for example, at the end, 100 databases, each with 10,000 records, for example, federated, connected, and especially good with working good with the performance with the connection of the SQL database. That is the reason for using federation, and of course partitioning, because it's connected. And partitioning, you can partition of data horizontal, for example, per row, like ID number 3, for example, cut the data and push for the other databases, the next, for example, 5 rows, and cut the data and push for the third databases, or vertical, per column. For example, if you have binaries in your databases, you can cut data and push the binaries for SQL, for Windows Azure storage, and keep for example, binaries on the storage. That is the partitioning. And AdventureWorks. Have you used AdventureWorks? Sometimes, for testing for something like this. If you want to use AdventureWorks for SQL Server 2012 and SQL Server Azure, you must remember that they are two different versions. You can download it on Codeplex, codeplex.com, and you can use it, but different version for AdventureWorks for SQL Server 2012 and SQL Azure. And short demo about the creating Azure database.
Any questions so far? Anything? Anybody got? Yeah?
Can an Azure instance be a subscriber in replication?
No. Nothing.
Yeah. For the beginning, you must use Windows Azure platform for the creating of. Okay, I should. Oh, it's not. It's necessary to change Spanish for English. It's okay.
Oh, you've got the old one. Oh, you see the new one in a minute. I've got the new interface. This is Silverlight. It's horrid. The new one's all HTML5 and spiffy and lovely.
Okay, we have for example, subscription. The process of subscription is not important. We create a database, region, using, for example, North Europe. The regions is the place where the Microsoft data centers with cloud services are exist. Yes, for example, North Europe. It's somewhere near Dublin.
No, West Europe. North Europe's. I can't remember.
Sweden?
Yeah, so it's somewhere up in Baltic somewhere.
Something like this. Okay. Can use administrator, password.
You were trying to use password, weren't you?
Yeah, password must be sensitive, of course, and
You've got to put your password in Spanish.
yeah. You want to see again? We must create firewall rules for our systems. For example, we have IP like this one.
So the default is you can't connect to a SQL Azure server outside of Azure. So you have to set up firewalls to let yourself get in.
For example, something like this. This is the first part of firewalls. The second, you must grant the permission for the Windows Azure services on the machine when you start to use Windows Azure, because internal services must must be connected with the Azure. And in fact, there are two rules in firewall. It's working on Wi-Fi here. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not Scott Good.
Yeah.
Anybody else hear about Scott Good's presentation in London? The Wi-Fi failed. Trying to do a cloud demo without internet connection. Why not? Kudos to the man for trying.
When you start creating the SQL database, of course you can use the name, web or business. In web, 1 gigabyte and 5 gigabytes, or in the business, like this one. Okay, we use now on the web, 1 gigabyte, accept.
Guys, can you put it in English? Might just be easier to say.
Yeah. English or English International?
We're English. Brad and Steve don't need to understand it.
Okay.
That would have worked.
The manifest, of course, databases.
Now you go.
Okay. Try to, let's, for example, the name, it's important. If you use your databases, for example, you create a specific name for database for instances. Something, yeah, you create something like a, I don't know, Warsaw, London, something like this, for example, yes? Here you have no possibility. Just look for this one.
They don't trust your real name.
Yeah. Okay. And now we have SQL Server, SQL Azure services, SQL database.
Windows Azure SQL database.
Windows Azure SQL database. Okay. Of course, we can connect this by standard tool. Yes. For example,
If you set up a DNS name with something more readable on your own domain, that work?
Yes, there are a couple of gotchas. The main gotcha is if you do that, because it only allows SQL Server logins, you have to have the @server name as part of the login, as the login UI, user ID. So you still need to have that because otherwise it can't identify the virtual SQL Azure server. So you'll get that when a connection retries. So for example, one of the problems I get is that you connect to the full name, then you're in a retry loop, and if you only have kind of like a login as SA, well, login as user, when it does the retry, it's connecting to the IP address, and if all you've specified is user, because it doesn't know what the server name is, it can't work out which server you're trying to connect to. So it's always best practice to use username @server name. It's just another way that it'll bite you.
a little bit difference with the what is Zoom? I don't know. That's not okay. You can see in the standard SQL Server you have icon like a database, and with the Azure you have something like a server and small blue SQL database with very strange name. But this name will be necessary, for example, for creating Windows AdventureWorks database if you want to use it. If you use AdventureWorks on standard on-premise SQL Server, how you can do this? How you can add AdventureWorks for your SQL Server environment?
Restore.
Restore, yeah? Something like this, for example. Restore database. Okay. Devices, somewhere on desktop. Where is my desktop? Full database backup. Execute. It's simple. In SQL data, Windows Azure SQL database, just a moment, yes? Okay. It's here. Okay, we have AdventureWorks. For SQL database, we can use something different, like a command prompt with data. But are you familiar with security of SQL Server? Yeah? Security is important for SQL Server?
Yeah.
A little bit, yes? Okay. What is important on this prompt? Name of database, okay. Account. And password. It's the password with open text, yes? Not hidden. And it's not HTTPS. It's not VPN.
HTTP.
Yeah. HTTP, yeah. Okay. Execute. Brilliant. Brilliant, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Oh. It's just going to keep on going. This Microsoft. This is on Codebase. This is what they give you. This is CMD. It works fine. But I think installation is complete.
Okay, back to the portal, for example. Refresh. No, it's not. Okay. I will back for this adventure works.
So, hopefully this thing will boost up. So that's SQL Azure. Lightning talk. But one of the main things that you'll notice is that there was no backup command. The top request, and my top request of SQL Azure, is some form of backup. So, like I said, I've been working with SQL Azure for a couple of years, and I found this lack, and I created a little tool for it called, funnily enough, SQL Azure Backup. Not Windows Azure SQL Database Backup, because it was before that time. But since then, that was a little client tool, and that was based on the technology of Redgate of SQL Compare and SQL Data Compare. So what it would do is it would just hook up to a database, and basically compare and data compare, use the engines, and just copy the whole thing locally, which worked really well. The problem was I couldn't really charge for it, in all fairness. It was a bit simple. So I've carried on that, and I've created Redgate Cloud Services. And this has been in production since February. There are people buying it, there are people using it. It's been running since then. And it's continually developing. It's designed as a suite of tools. If you're going to go into cloud development, I've made a system that I can add tools to support people in cloud development. So these things is constantly improving. So I can do backup and restore to SQL Azure, and I can also got synchronizing for Azure storage, both to and from Amazon. So you can also back up your SQL Azure database to Amazon. And also there's obviously scheduling, because there's no SQL agent on SQL Azure, so I'll do all the scheduling. And email notification, because you want to know where it goes wrong. So the format of the backup is actually a backpack file. Is anybody familiar with this? One of them. It's a logical disk backup. This logical format for a SQL Azure database, for a SQL database really. And what this is, it's a zip file. If you rename it, it's a zip file. Inside it, there is XML files containing all the schema definitions, and a directory which contains JSON data of the data in your tables. So when you actually insert one of these things, you're not restoring all of the indexes and everything, you're actually inserting data into a table. So of course this is going to be considerably slower than actually restoring a back file. Yeah? Makes sense? I'm using this because this is the only way really to get data out of SQL Azure at the moment. This is all Microsoft give me. There are other techniques I could use. For example, I could go back and use the SQL Compare and Data Compare APIs and create a zip of scripts. That feels even nastier somehow. I could create my own binary format.
Is it kind of a key to what the way that MySQL backup is?
I don't know how MySQL backups.
Basically, it's a massive long script.
Nice.
Yeah.
No. And also, one of the other things is you notice on SQL Azure is you don't really have the granularity of permissions. So when you want to back up a database, you have to give that user pretty much everything. You have to give the rights to the castle, which is a bit of a pain, if I'm honest. Hopefully, Microsoft are going to do some access control around this area, because it's just nasty. Is this making sense to people? General nodding? Good. Ah, what have I just done? Ah, it's all gone wrong. Hang on, try that again. Oh yeah, I'm going to do a demo. I'm going to show you cloud services. Has anybody seen cloud services at all? Right, this is my baby. I'm basically, I've been in Redgate for about 7.5 years now. So when I joined, Redgate was about 20 people, and now Redgate's about 290. And so I've basically done everything, and now what I'm doing is kind of intrapreneurial within Redgate, which is an awful word, but bear with me. Basically, it's like being an entrepreneur, but Redgate still pays my mortgage, which is nice. Which means I get to do pretty much whatever I like. And what I've done is regulate cloud services. So it's very easy. It's a very simple website, mainly because I don't have much design time. It's me plus one other working on this site. But that also allows us to be incredibly lean and really make things move quite fast. So since February, I've got to keep a little blog here of all the changes that I've made. You know, for example, hey, you know, I've added edit job. One of the first things I added was email notification. You know, some of this stuff you put it out there and see and make it better. People's input. You guys coming here for, you know, coming here to listen to radio. What I need is I need people to go and try this tool out and say, actually, you know what? It'd be really good if it did X. And that's what I do. Type in my XKCD long password. Anyone else see that XKCD cartoon about 5 dictionary words? No. This is one of our demo laptops. I'm not going to let you guys have my password. But here we go, we've got a set of tools. Initially, there was literally one tool, which was backup. Now, we're up to seven tools. There's, you know, there's familiarity. So, backup SQL Azure to Azure Blob Storage, or backup SQL Azure to Amazon S3. You know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Restore as well. But if I show you these tools, you'll see quite how simple they are to use. Here we go. So just give me the credentials. So for example, go to the Azure Management Portal. This is the new one. So Tobias's one.
Yeah.
This one's sexy. Look at this. Oh yeah. We're all HTML5 and metroed up now. Eventually it'll load. And, you know, it's showing me Headnote Cloud Services is transitioning. One of my websites is down. But that's okay, I don't care, I've got to. So I can go here and I can enter my lovely KJBC1XQYU6. Rolls off the tongue. And I can enter my that, I can enter my password, and I can see my databases. There we go, I want to backup widget dev. And I need my storage account name, that's that. Storage access key, I want that to go back into the management portal. Hang on, go to here. There. Go. Choose where I'm going to back it up to. I'm going to back it up to SQL in the City. Hello, everybody. Everybody. And I've got fairly simple retention policies. Kind of like keep it for a number of days. Anything that's over a number of days, just get rid of it, please. I'll turn that off for now. And I get to set up a schedule on the next page. What's your time zone? Let's go. What time zone are you? Where are you? Up. I was going to do Poland. Awesome, there we go. Let's do Polish. And let's have 2 backups in the day. Let's have one at 11 and one at 5. Why not? But let's not back up on Tuesdays, because I don't like Tuesdays. And just hit schedule. And that's it. That's me set up to back up on a schedule for my SQL Azure database. It's going to go to my Azure storage. Eventually this will load. This is another thing. So this little loading thing here is quite slow. That's because I'm using Quartz.net to my scheduler. Quartz.net re-establishes a connection to the SQL database every single request. Connecting to SQL Azure is expensive. You don't want to do it. You want to hold those connections and do as much as you can on one go. So it's another thing that you're going to have to watch out for when you're moving to SQL Azure from a local on-prem. There's lots of little gotchas. And there we go, there's my job all set up. If I just run it now, oops, don't do that. that will actually fire off the job. I'm busy backing up. And eventually, I go to Cloud Storage Studio. That will actually, we'll have a look at that in a second. It shouldn't take too long. There we go, it's already 21%. And that's using a Microsoft service to create a backpack file and just put it in a place. But it's all done for you. You can do this thing yourself, but why bother? Does that make sense? Yeah? Right. Let's go back to my very small presentation. How are we doing for time? Okay. The other thing I can do is storage backup. So anybody had a look at Azure Storage? Now I know you're all kind of database people, but presumably you store files. Yeah? Files are good. You're serving up files on a website. Yeah, you've got lots of files on a disk somewhere. File stream? SQL Azure doesn't do file stream. Other gotcha. But Azure Storage, even if you don't like SQL Azure, Azure Storage is well worth looking at. It's got some very cool features. It's also massively scalable and a content distribution network. So there are a lot of people who I've got who are using storage. So I also provide, oh, there we go, my backup's just finished. Hang on, let's have a look, should be here. There we go, there's my backup. Simple. Here we go, that's the one. So you can back up from a storage container to another storage container. This is one I set up earlier. Again, it's all quite simple. The user interface is really clean, mainly because I don't have much time with the designers. So all the Redgate tools are all really pretty and beautiful and easy to use. Mine are really easy to use because I'm dumb. I like dumb things. What else was I going to say? I think I was going to say much more about that. Oh, the other thing, of course, is this at the moment is fairly simple. It's just like one container, another container. Okay? So effectively, you're backing up a directory to another directory. These directories can be several petabytes in size, or 2 terabytes in size. So it's fairly flexible. But this is what I'm creating. This will be going live in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm already developing the system, as you can see. So now I'm going to be able to take multiple containers. So for example, if you're programmatically creating containers and destroying them, you want to just be able to say, back up all the containers that you happen to find to a completely separate account. I'm also going to probably add versioning history. So one of the cool features about Azure Storage is it can actually store versions of the file. So think of a file system crossed with a source control system. So you can actually say, I want to store this file, checkpoint this version at this point in time. Then I want to overwrite this file. Now I want to go back to the file as it was at that previous version. No problem, it's still there. Quite nice. There's a lot of cool little features like that in Azure Storage. And the idea is that cloud services are going to keep on adding these features as people tell them what they want, as you start investigating the cloud. That's really it. And plus, I think we're good on time.
Yeah.
I think so. Got a bunch of links for you, but is your thing working?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, we'll switch back to Tobias. Any quick questions on that? Yes? Yes?
Can it only do full backups at the moment?
Yes, you can only do full backs at the moment, full backups.
Can you schedule anything else?
I was going to do a schedule, for example, just run an arbitrary SQL sending result. I've not had many people request that, so I'm driven, because I've got such limited resource that I need, I tend to do what people ask for. So until people
I was
ask,
thinking about, if there's no SQL agent,
yeah,
what would you do, let's say you're using Azure for a reporting repository, and normally with on-premises you'd run a job which purged historic data every night or weekly that's dropped out of retention scope.
yeah.
You can't do that with Azure, so it needs some external
Yeah, so I would be able to provide that system.
to run this properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, what cloud services is to me, is it's not SQL Azure backup, it's a full system that I can add tools too, as people come to me and say, you know, I really need this. You know, I'm going to pay $10 a month, $10 a month for 31 jobs. It doesn't make sense not to, really. I don't think that that's right. I hope you agree.
We try, yeah.
So I've got no issue with what you're doing, it's fantastic. But as you're offering it, it's a paid service or whatever, is there any form of SLA underpinning this?
SLA?
Service level agreement.
Yes, of course. It's
Yeah.
of course, but service level agreement, it's very interesting with the services because Microsoft guarantee your normally 99.5.
I'm not talking about Azure SLA.
Talking about, yeah.
I'm talking
Oh.
about your SLA. Yeah.
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 No.
No.
No. There's no SLA under that.
I could, there would be, but I just wanted to.
Yeah. I'm not at that level. I'm not at that level yet. I'm still, you know, effectively a startup within Redgate.
So does all that $10 a month go to you then?
It goes to pay for my pastries at breakfast.
Okay, the last one. Name of our database and server. Username, database name again, and password. It should work, I think, this time.
Is this the one you said that takes like a millennia? I don't think we're going to have that long.
It will be something like on Wi-Fi here, like 5 minutes, something like this. But we'll wait just a moment. On the premise, we have AdventureWorks from our on-premise services. For example, this is my server, and we have sales customers, for example. Select top 1,000 rows. Just simple. But here I want to wait for the end. It will be for 2 minutes, I think, to show you what the select top 1,000 rows working on SQL Azure. We need AdventureWorks for this. If you have any other questions,
More questions?
Yes.
Yes.
SQL Azure, can you see the execution plans?
Yeah, you can actually. Yeah.
Anywhere where there's a good, simple, like, list of the gotchas with
There's not one central one. I keep on adding them to my blog as I come across them. So
because it's like general, it's like you kind of started out with that in the talk with some of the differences and things like that. But it'd be really good just to have like the cruise sheet of like the top 50 things that all of us kind of use.
yeah, so I mean, like I say, I keep on adding them to my blog. I'm not centralised a single resource yet for that.
It'd be a really good thing.
Okay.
I'm just saying generally, you know, I'd like to see it on the Azure platform. You know, like when
The problem is they're not going to. The problem is that what Microsoft's going to tell you is they're going to tell you all the differences and greatness. They're not going to tell you about that bit about certainly.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Yeah, but it's different, even the differences. Like
There is stuff on the differences, yeah. So on the Microsoft site, there is a side-by-side kind of what isn't there in SQL Azure. Sorry, I think back. Did you have a question?
Sorry, yeah. Sometimes I'm bad with this, but did you say that it only supports clustered indexes?
You have to have a clustered index on your table.
So you can use non.
You can add other indexes afterwards, but you must have a clustered index.
Okay. Installation complete this time.
We'll come back.
Refresh. No?
I know you called it SIC. You called it that.
No. It's the only one.
Okay, it's not there. Yes.
Good question.
How popular is actually SQL Azure? Has SQL Society around the world taken actually debate, and Microsoft can already say that this product has a solid ground and they will be developing it, or they still are not sure if?
As far as I'm aware, Microsoft are committed to SQL Azure, but Windows Azure SQL database.
How popular is it?
Last time I looked, it was about 5%, so we can see these things because we've got usage statistics on SQL prompt. If you opt into the usage statistics on SQL prompt, you can see which databases you're connecting to. So last time I checked, about 5% of DBAs have connected to SQL Azure. I don't expect it's gone up that much more than that. It seems that the growth rate seems to be fairly flat.
Because it seems like that there's a lot of limitations, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of limitations, but for if you just want to get something up and running quickly, something quick and dirty, something with a small database, something on the website, something hosted, something that might have to scale, it's great. It really is great. You get replication, you get resilience for free. You know, your database is hosted on anywhere from 3 to 9 different computers. It's really quite, you know, for $10 a month, that's pretty good.
What about locations? Because one of my clients is in the US, and we have to keep the data in the US.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so there is an issue with Germany at the moment. So Germany's got the same problem. The data in Germany must be kept in Germany. There isn't a German Azure hosting center.
And in France too.
Okay, France as well got a problem.
And in Poland too.
Yeah.
So apart from quick and dirty solutions, what are the other factors that you think will drive the adoption of Azure?
I think there's the scalability. I think there's the cost of maintaining local hardware. So, you know, you imagine how much effort it takes to set up a database server and a set of databases that are all replicated, they're resilient, you can set up a backup on them, get them all running. That's quite a lot of work if you don't have the hardware. I mean, the other thing is people scaling out. So one of my customers, he has to get like 100 million hit websites up and running in hours. You can't have that hardware sitting around. And for experiments and for prototyping, it's brilliant.
Well, it's been challenged now by AWS, because you can have a full SQL instance on AWS now.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, the Amazon RDS is pretty good actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a good look at it. You know, if you're looking at full SQL Server, yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay, we have 2 minutes. Yeah, something like this.
Are RDS covered SQL?
Yes, RDS. So on Amazon, there is RDS for SQL. There is RDS SQL Server. So that's full SQL Server.
Does SMO work with SQL Server?
Don't know. Don't know.
Okay, and we finished soon, just not for the moment. Again, the select top 1000 rows. You see the lot of functionality for the SQL 7 on premise, and we can go for the adventure works on SQL Azure. The same table, salesperson. Yes, you see the difference? Yes, customer? Yes, but it doesn't matter. Yeah? Yes, okay. You can create something like, for example, new query.
Yeah, you can't have modified. If you try to go store procedure modify SQL Azure, nah, I'm not going to let you do that. You have to do it yourself.
How would you do that?
As in alter store proc. It doesn't actually generate you the thing in SSMS view.
Yeah, so you can't script it. Is that what
you can. It's just.
So I presume the development time is much, much longer than.
Yeah. So what I do is I develop in SQL Server
more expensive
and migrate. I don't develop directly on SQL Azure. The thing is, you've got to be aware of what you're doing on SQL Server will migrate to SQL Azure.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a very common scenario. So when you're debugging locally, you're going to be on SQL Server. When you're running a live system, you're going to be on SQL Azure.
Are there any tools available to actually validate a database design
for Azure compatibility?
There's a couple out there. So there's one on Koprowski. There's obviously Pair. But yeah, I think there's SQL Azure Migration Wizard, which is a Koprowski project. Last time I looked at it, it was pretty ropey, if I'm honest.
Can you limit to IP addresses? So, because I've noticed you can put the actual primary database. You've got the primary database DNS, and then you use no password. Normally, all my databases are behind firewalls.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is exposed. Can you limit to certain IP addresses of my clients or?
Yes. Yeah. So the setup, I don't know whether you spotted it, but when Tobias actually created the server, he set the firewall rules. So you could only connect to a server.
We haven't time now for the explanation, but with the firewall rules, for example, you must create an exception for firewalls connection for any clients. For example, if Richard wants to connect to my database, which I created, they must create rule for this, for example, client, for this laptop, for example, yes? You must,
but also bear in mind, SQL Azure servers are free if the databases you pay for. So if you do want separate databases on separate IP ranges, the firewall rules are set at a server level, not at a database level.
okay.
I think we're out of time because there's beer.
And especially because you talk about security, no auditing and no encryption.
No.
Yes.
We're here for questions. We can carry on.
We'll be here, yes. Thank you very much.
Give me high marks.
Why would I use it? There's one reason.
They're adding them. So I know, for example, so there's two new sites coming in the US in the last 6 months. Yeah, it's one of the things with cloud services. You know, like you were saying about Germany and France, they've got that issue, and all of them have that issue. No, I mean, I think it'd be interesting, you know, if Microsoft allow me talking about it like private Azure clouds, so it's a cheaper kind of rack and environment installed somewhere, which
You see something like that?
I'll probably send you an email.
Yeah, please do. Okay. Well, I'm happy to help.
There is a guy here yesterday at 1.
Yeah, you looked at it yesterday.
Okay.
I went to bed early last night, but then I still woke up early.
All right.
What happens now?
Beer and then drawing. Drawing.
Oh,
Draw that effort and drop it.
No, drop server, it's better.
That's so dangerous. I hit that accidentally once. Actually, yeah, in that one. In that interface, it's really easy to hit. Mind you, it's just as bad as this one. This one's great. You can hack.
Yeah, we should show this tomorrow.
Drop server is the most petrifying thing known to man.
Now I can wait for the binning for push insert the adventure works.
Yes. I think was it because you had the wrong server name or something? Was it? Is that why?
You wrong server name and name. Yeah.
I thought it was that.
Okay. Can go on. Yeah. The examinators. Or examinators.
It shows you compare. Right, shut that down. Having fun? Staying on for sightseeing?
Yeah, till Monday.
Ah, that's good. Have you seen the Shard yet? I've not seen it.
No.
The new tallest building in Western Europe.
No.
You know about that? There's a building in London that's now the tallest building in Western Europe.
It's the similar to the building in Barcelona? No, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Kind of like a pyramid.
Oh yeah. On the somewhere near Liverpool station.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Liverpool Street. Yeah.
I don't believe it exists. I've not seen it yet. Till I see it with my own eyes, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Pyramid in the center of London.
Well, that's painful by the Dubai government, I think. Right. Time to go down some beer. Right. I shall see you tomorrow then.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
Woo! Oh, are you?
You going to for beer?
Yeah. I better have. Actually, I better take this. Actually, I'm going to take the birthday projector down. That's what I forgot. As I'm the last in the room. I'll see you out there.
See you. This way. 4, 3, 2, 1. Go.